North Carolina has always had a rich musical heritage, and we're proud to be a part of such a great treasure.
Join Brooke and I as we talk to some of our favorite musicians, some good friends from our home state of North Carolina. Hear their story and see how bluegrass music has shaped their lives and their career.
Hi, and welcome to another of the Carolina Sessions. Today, we're so excited to bring you our good friend and amazing musician here in North Carolina, Mr. Jack Lawrence. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Brooke. Hope you are.
We are very well, yes. Considering these times, I suppose, but
Yeah.
we're making the most of things. So, well, can you tell us a little bit about growing up in North Carolina and what it was like growing up around Charlotte and playing?
Sure. I am a native Charlottean,
Uh-huh.
and my parents were both music lovers. And when I was around, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old, my parents became good friends with a country music duo named Carl and Pearl Butler. And so we would visit them when I was a kid, you know, on our vacations. We'd go to Franklin to their farm. So that got me interested in playing music. And then a year or two after that, my dad took a job at a place called the Lake Norman Music Hall, which is between Mooresville and Denver, North Carolina. And so I grew up there backstage. I'm sorry, Darin?
Everybody come through there, didn't they?
Oh, everybody. I saw everybody from Flatt and Scruggs to the Country Gentlemen to Jerry Lee Lewis, Ernest Tubb, Marty Robbins, you know, and then there were gospel sings on Sunday, and so almost every Sunday. And so I saw all the popular, you know, gospel quartets of the day. And so I grew up backstage there, and I got to meet everybody in the business. And, you know, I was a kid running around backstage with a guitar. You know? I'm sure I just really bugged some of those people to death, but most of them were pretty good about talking to me and showing me things. And I mean, I remember, let's see, the guy that played guitar with Ernest Tubb, Leon Rhodes, showed me a couple of things backstage. Kenny Lovelace, who played with Jerry Lee Lewis, showed me a couple of things. And so, you know, that was a great learning experience in itself. And by the time I got to high school, you know, I'd been at the music hall almost every weekend and playing. But when I was in high school, I took a job after school and on Saturdays with a guy named C.E. Ward, who, you know, had an instrument repair shop. And he was doing work for all the bluegrass guys, Jimmy Martin. In fact, I inlaid Jimmy Martin's initials in the bridge of his old guitar when I was about 16. And through that, you know, I met the Osborne brothers, who I had seen at the music hall. Gosh, just about everybody came through, because that was before there was anybody in Nashville doing repair work. So we were getting stuff from Hank Williams Jr. We were working on, I helped rub out the finish on Sonny Osborne's first 6-string banjo neck, you know.
Oh, wow.
And at the time, Ward was working with Carl Story. And so I became the kid that they brought out that Carl would bring out on stage, you know, and play a couple of guitar tunes. And so I did my first festival stuff with Carl Story.
Now you was
when I was about 16. I was 16
years old. Yeah, man. Well, what an experience that was, working with CE and getting to learn to work on instruments and fret and do inlay and everything, man. That's amazing.
It was quite an experience. CE was a character for sure, you know. And through him, I met all the local guys. I ended up playing in CE's band, so I was playing with a guy named Ronnie Prevette, great mandolin player who went on to work with Jimmy Martin a couple of different times. And then, you know, doing the fiddlers conventions where you grew up and where I grew up,
Right.
although at different periods. You're so much younger. You know, I mean, they were great guitar players. A guy named Tommy Edwards, who was, you know, he was older than me by, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. But you know, a really powerful player with a lot of downstrokes, like Bill Monroe style,
Yeah.
on guitar. And there were other guys. There was Ray Klein, great guitar player that I was able to swap licks with. And there was a guy that was maybe the best of all of us, a guy named Michael Allman, who eventually just stopped doing it. But Michael was probably the best guitar player during that period, including Tony Rice, who was around at that time. I mean, Tony was good.
Yeah.
You know, and I'd see him around at these fiddlers conventions, you know, and so I got involved with a guy named Garland Shuping, banjo player.
Back up just a little bit. Where was Michael from?
Michael was from near Ashboro, a little place called Happy Valley.
Oh, yeah.
Over close to Seagrove, where
Right.
my father's family is from.
Right.
But he was terrific.
Garland Shupin is what, Greensboro area? Where's he from?
Actually around a little place called Gold Hill.
Yeah.
Up near, well, just past Meisenheimer or just around in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Up above
Richfield.
Kind of almost right in that area. And you was later in the band with Garland also. I know that's jumping forward a little bit, but.
Well, not by much, because by the time I was, you know, I'd seen Garland and Garland and Tony and Ronnie Purvett they played together at these fiddlers conventions. So, you know, I met those guys, you know, when I was 15, 16 years old. Yeah, that's about right. I met Tony when I was 15. He was about 17. And it was about the same time I met all these guys. And, you know, also people like Dewey Farmer, you know, A.L. Wood.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, a little later on, I was a Smoky Ridge boy for a while with A.L., which was pretty cool. But, you know, right out of high school, I had this band with Garland Shuping, David and Jeffrey Whittington, and Terry Balcom, and we did some stuff, mostly fiddlers convention stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I learned a lot from Garland. I learned, you know, a lot about harmony singing and timing, and yeah, that was a real period of expansion for my music.
Right.
And I was just a kid, so you know, we had this little band after it was just after Terry and I finished, Terry Balcom and I finished playing at the Land of Oz.
Oh,
we
yeah.
were in a band. We were in a band during the summer that played on Uncle Henry's front porch at the Land of Oz.
Oh, yeah.
With a fellow named David Cawson and another guy named Lonnie Carpenter.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on the tip top of the mountain. So, you know, this was the summer of 1971. I had just gotten out of high school, and we did that, and then let's see, gosh, there was by the Labor Day weekend, you know, at the big Camp Springs Bluegrass Festival, there was this huge mix-up of bands. Tony Rice was leaving the Bluegrass Alliance. Doyle Lawson left J.D. Crowe to go with
Country Gentleman. And it just so happened the New Deal String Band was looking for a guitar player. So, you know, after that festival, I actually went up to DC and played with, because Tony Rice was supposed to go with Jimmy Goodrow and Eddie Adcock to do the Second Generation. Well, he decided to go with Crow instead. And so I went up and played for about a week with those guys, and it just, my voice had not matured enough to, I wasn't really the singer they were looking for. So I came back home and got a call from the New Deal String Band, and we were just a bunch of long-haired hippie boys playing bluegrass music. And you know, and it was good. It was good. Leroy Savage, you know, was the singer, and he could sing tenor to a dog whistle. Frank Greathouse was the mandolin player, and at that point, Frank was, you know, one of the young guys to look at, you know. So I started playing with those guys, and stayed there for a few months, couple months, and I got lured away by Lonnie Pierce in around November or December, actually, of 1971. Sam Bush and Curtis Birch and Courtney, and I mean the whole band left the Bluegrass Alliance to start Newgrass.
Right.
And so I got the call, and they got me at a weak moment because I really enjoyed the New Deal String Band. But it was in the middle of winter. I was living in a drafty old farmhouse. I had the flu, you know, and so I agreed to come up, to go up to Louisville. And what eventually happened, I mean, this took until the middle of January for everything to gel with the Alliance. But what eventually happened was Lonnie got a bunch of North Carolina boys to go up and play in the first version of the Alliance after Sam and those guys left. And it was Garland Shupin, Ronnie Prevette, Pete Coram, and me. And so
so
I moved
to North Carolina, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, it just imported the whole band, you know. And there is a certain North Carolina sound to this music. I mean, look at the guys, you know, like the Bluegrass Buddies with Lewis Pirtle, or Lou Reed, as most people know him,
right?
And Jimmy Haley, you know, and Jeff Hooker. You know, I mean, that was, you know, the timing was different. You know, Doyle Lawson did the same thing later when he hired all these guys from North Carolina in his band. Right. It gave him the drive that there was a certain drive in the rhythm section, and it's kind of inherent to me to the Piedmont, North Carolina bluegrass style.
Right. Absolutely.
And so it was, you know, an interesting thing. So, you know, all these North Carolina guys went up and started playing with the Bluegrass Alliance, and one by one we filtered out. I mean, I didn't last long. Yeah. I think Ronnie Prevette was the first one to leave. He got the job with Jimmy Martin, and I ended up being fired from the band, actually, because you know, I was 18 years old, and I didn't know anybody in Louisville, except Sam, right. You know, Sam Bush and Courtney Johnson and Curtis Birch. You know, I mean, they were all there, and they were my friends from, you know, for a couple of years at this point.
Didn't like them at that time.
No, he did not like them at all at that time. So because I was hanging out with those guys, you know, Lonnie you know, there were two things. Lonnie wanted me to play like Dan Crary, which one, I didn't want to do, and two, I couldn't. And he wanted me to stop hanging out with the Newgrass boys.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I wouldn't do either of those things. So he eventually fired me. And then, you know, then Garland left. You know, Pete left first and went with James Monroe, and then eventually went with Lester Flatt. And I'm not sure exactly. I think Garland left and went with Jim and Jesse.
Wow.
So, and this all happened fairly quickly. Garland did go back for a while, for a second stint in the Alliance, but I was over it. I went back to the New Deal string band where I belonged.
I hear you. I know y'all played all over the South, and you ended up playing around Atlanta a little bit, I guess, in the underground down there. Was that with New Deal? Or?
I did. It was actually an offshoot of the New Deal string band. It got to where there wasn't enough work in this area, and a couple of the former members of the New Deal string band ended up in Atlanta in a couple of different places.
Mm-hmm.
In underground. There was a place called Muhlenbrink's, and I worked at a place called Banknote. And you know, the way that all came about is, you know, I ended up back home here in North Carolina and played with A.L. Wood and the Smoky Ridge Boys for a while, which was terrific. When I first started playing with him, it was a sit-in basis because Odell Wood was ill and couldn't tour, and so Les Deaton switched over to the bass, and Dewey Farmer played mandolin, and I came in as a guitar player, and that was a really good band.
Yeah.
And you know, A.L. taught me a lot. He taught me banjo. He taught me harmony parts. You know. And at that point, he had the look, he had the original material, you know, he just didn't have the backing and the wherewithal to really go out and do it on the road. And I'm not sure he really wanted to, but he was the whole package back in those days. And so I left AL after a few months. Jimmy Arnold was playing with us in the AL Wood band as well.
Right.
And the Smoky Ridge Boys for a while, and that was great. He was playing the fiddle. But anyway, I got a job offer from a fellow named Jim Smoke, which was steadier work, and so I had to move back to Louisville.
Back to Kentucky again.
Back to Kentucky again, and in that band I played with one of the members of that band was Ricky Birch, Curtis Birch's younger brother, who was a great banjo player. And it was an odd setup with Jim, because Jim didn't work Saturday nights for religious reasons. His religion wouldn't allow him to work on Saturday night. And so he brought Ricky in the band to play rhythm guitar on most nights, but on Saturday nights, you know, he was our banjo player. And that really worked out okay for a while. But, you know, like all things, it kind of petered out.
Sure.
You know, and I was a kid, and it didn't matter at that point. I was just ready to go anywhere I could to play music for a living, you know. So when that petered out, Ricky Birch and I headed down to Atlanta. We didn't have anything else going on, and Atlanta was closer to his hometown of Brunswick, Georgia, and not really very much closer to home for me. But we went to Atlanta just to hang out and to visit and see everybody and see if there were any opportunities at all. And so we went into the Banknote and ended up sitting in with a band called Strangers on a Train, which was my old friend Leroy Savage from the New Deal String Band, a guy, Huey Wiley, who played mandolin from Douglasville, Georgia, who I had met at fiddlers conventions and festivals when I was even younger, and Al Osteen, great banjo player. And so they ended up hiring us because they were playing 6 sets a night, 6 nights a week.
Wow.
And there was other former members of the New Deal String Band just down the street at Muhlenbrink's, doing the same thing. And if you went the other direction, Lou Reed, Percy McMillan, and Jimmy Haley was there for a little while. Jeff Hooker was there. So all these North Carolina boys had another band at a place called the Apothecary. So it was a lot of bluegrass and underground at that point. There were 3 different spots, really. And they were all North Carolina guys. So, we finally figured out, since, it was a big band, that we could each have a night off by swapping instruments around. So when Al had his night off from playing the banjo, Ricky would play banjo, and I would switch to bass. And so I ended up, and when Ricky had his night off, I would play bass, because that's what Ricky was playing in the band. So 6 sets a night, even if it was only 2 nights a week playing bass, I kind of got a handle on how to play bass doing 6 sets a night.
Oh yeah.
So, and it also got my chops up with guitar, because it's just so many hours that, that we're working.
That'll put you in shape quick.
Yeah, I need something like that now. I don't know if I could.
Absolutely.
With this COVID thing, staying at home, I can diddle around and practice and work on stuff, but I'm not using all the muscle power that you would use playing in an ensemble.
Yeah, playing against somebody, it's
a
challenge, Brooke's got a whole lot better rhythm playing in the last 5 months. I'm pushing her. Oh, man. Well, speaking of duos, you had a duo with Joe Smothers for a while about this time, correct?
It was a little later on. There was another band I had with Al Osteen and a guy named Larry Jefferson down in South Carolina for about a year, which was a pretty good band too. Larry Jefferson had played with Charlie Moore, and of course Al and I had been in a couple of bands together, in Atlanta and in Nashville, house band type gigs.
Right.
So that would have been 73 in Nashville. By 74 or so, around 74, I went to and played with Al out of Anderson, South Carolina, and that was a pretty cool band too. But after everything else I was doing at that time, it petered out, and I ended up back in Charlotte, and met a bunch of players. They were more country and rock oriented players, and so I ended up in a band called the Buddy Row Band. I played either a Gibson SG or a Les Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And that really kind of opened up the fretboard for me, because I had to learn to play in positions, because I didn't want to. Now you see people all over slapping a capo on the electric guitar. And I could have done that, but I just forced myself to learn the fretboard better, and that really opened a lot of things up. Well, Joe was part of that band, and it was a good band. I mean, we were looked at by several record companies, but we were just too young and stupid to make it all work. You know, because we had original material and the harmonies were there. And, you know, we did one showcase and they wanted us to do a tour that we wouldn't make any money on. And a couple of the guys balked at that. They wouldn't do that. And so they signed Alabama instead.
Oh, wow.
So Joe and I were, so directly after that band, I put another band together with Terry Balcom on banjo, Leroy Savage on bass, and Tony Williamson on mandolin. And of course that didn't last long either, but it was a pretty good band. We did some opening act stuff with John Hartford and that sort of thing.
Right.
And that probably didn't last more than 6 or 7 months. And that's when Joe and I started playing together as a duo. And that was one of the better things I've ever done, really.
Wow.
You know, we were writing songs together, and you know, we were fairly successful in touring. You know, I mean, at least we were paying the bills, and by this point, you know, I was married with my first son during that period.
Right.
And you know, I managed to pay the mortgage and feed us with Joe's.
Wasn't it? That's right.
I'm sorry?
That was the main thing, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. You got to do both of those things.
And it was through, I guess you met Merle and Doc. Is that right?
Yeah. I had met Doc before that when I was around 16 or 17, you know, in Union Grove.
Yeah.
At Harper Van Hoy's place, the Fiddler's Grove, when it, you know, it was new. So I was 16 or 17 when that happened. But, you know, I mean, it was just hello, how are you? And we talked guitars for a while.
Right.
But after I started touring with Joe, what was the key is that I met Merle. And he and I became friends. And Joe and I started doing opening act things with Doc and Merle. And, you know, Merle would come in and sit in with our country rock band and play slide guitar. And so I got to know Merle pretty well. And so in 1983, I got a phone call from, and Doc and I had played a couple of things, you know, a couple of times together, but not much.
Yeah.
But in '83, I got a phone call from Merle because he, in October it was, because he had heard that Joe and I were going to stop touring. You know, Joe and Margie had just had their first child, and Joe needed to stay closer to home. And so on a Friday afternoon, I got a phone call from Merle, and he said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to mow my grass, and you know, other than that, I don't have any real plans." And he said, "Well, you know, why don't you, you know, if you want to, I'll have a ticket for you at the airport, and you know, fly to Chicago and play with Doc and T. Michael. I just don't want to go." And so I said, "Okay." It beats mowing the grass. So
Anytime.
so you know, I expected we'd get up there and you know, at least do a little bit of rehearsing, because I'd never really played with Doc or T. Michael to speak of, you know, other than like encores when we were doing the opening act. I'd come out and play with them. But that didn't happen. You know, we went and did the sound check, did about 3 songs, I think, for the sound check, and then went to have dinner and came back, and Doc said, well, do you know this song? Do you know this one? Do you know that one? And I said, yeah, I'm familiar with all of them. This one I have never played, but I've heard it a lot. And this one I played a lot, and this one I played some, And that was it. He figured out the first 3 songs that we were going to do, and we went out and started the show.
Wow.
And, I guess it all worked out because I ended up there for about 27 years.
That's a pretty good side, man. Sure enough. Probably one of the longest in bluegrass music or Americana music, I guess you could say. I thought Doc was really the first Americana artist. They say John Prine and Rodney Crowell, but I think they go back to Doc. I mean, he was it.
Well, yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I mean, Doc wasn't writing songs, but he chose his material from a lot of different styles and genres.
Yeah.
And put it together pretty well, in his own style. And that happened, when he went up and did it must have been 67 or so, when he did the Good Deal in Nashville record with all the A-team Nashville session players.
Right.
And his Memories album to me is that double record set that came out, I don't know what, 74 or somewhere in there, I'm not sure. But, I consider parts of that Americana, and he would always do this rockabilly set too. So he, blue suede shoes and a whole lot of shaking and, that stuff. We did that pretty much every night.
Wow.
Almost every gig, so yeah, I would call Doc an Americana artist.
He's the man, there's no doubt. We've enjoyed it, and I know you did for 27 years, man, playing with that. You played all over the world at some of the finest places that you can play acoustic music, and I've heard you say you played some of the worst places that you could play to.
Oh yeah. I mean, we played everywhere from Lincoln Center to, Carnegie Hall a couple of times. The Bottom Line, which is a great club. The Birchmere, another great club. But, on the other end of the spectrum, we played like Bully's Big Country and in Virginia Beach. Which was just a squid bar. It was a Navy personnel place where the guys from the Navy base would come and get drunk.
Wow.
And it was a pretty terrible gig. We actually played that was one of the worst. Another of the worst was we played for R.J. Reynolds in Winston-Salem. I just started playing with Doc, I guess. But they had the Vantage Cup tennis tournament sponsored by R.J. Reynolds. And so they had this big deal at a hotel in Winston-Salem. And the atrium where they had this event was probably like 3 acres under a roof, and there was food laid out everywhere, and there were celebrities everywhere, Dinah Shore and Burt Reynolds and all the tennis stars and, all these celebrities. And they set us up at the very end of the thing between 2 bars. And in front of us were all the banquet tables, and all the food and stuff. And there were, there were probably 1,600 people in this room milling around, eating and talking and drinking. And we finished the first song, nothing. There was no response from anybody in the room. And I immediately turned around to the bar that was on my right and said, I'll have a whiskey straight up right here, please. And T. Michael did the same thing. And
Yeah.
we played the entire show. Not the first little bit of applause or any kind of recognition. It was totally nothing from this crowd of people. And that just really, that one of the most angry I've ever seen Doc was
Really?
that gig. And of course the promoter, the guy that hired us, was a big fan, and he thought it was terrific, and Doc just railed on him. This is the worst job I ever had in my life, and the poor guy was, he was crestfallen, because he really was a fan, and he did enjoy what we did, but nobody else paid attention at all.
Right. That's the worst kind, sure enough.
Oh yeah.
Well, man, what do you think the impact has been on MerleFest being here in North Carolina, to fans, to musicians, and it's just been a great festival here. We'll talk about a few places like that, like MerleFest and Green Acres, and of course you already mentioned Lake Norman Music Hall, but events like that for other younger musicians and just fans, and how it's grown the music in Carolina.
Well, one of my favorite places was the old Camp Springs Bluegrass Festival.
Uh-huh.
That Carlton Haney had moved from Fincastle, Virginia. He moved it to North Carolina, I don't know, 67 or 8, something like that.
Yeah.
And that was, the first big bluegrass festival in the state, really.
Right.
And so that was a huge impact, but mostly, just for bluegrass fans, which at that point was a really narrow market. What MerleFest is done is expanded that market to, by booking acts on the periphery of music, like Doc said, is traditional plus, that's how he termed his music, traditional plus whatever I want to play.
Yeah.
And so, with that in mind, MerleFest did, after the first couple of years with growing pains, like in any event, they finally after the first few years, hit on a formula that really worked. And they were able to draw in people that that maybe not, weren't associated with bluegrass so much, but but with the peripheral musics, not necessarily offshoots of bluegrass, but folk music and country music, and and bringing in the fans from the different genres, really exposed a lot of people to bluegrass music.
Right.
And so, and it certainly made a economic impact on the region up there, which is, is not a bad thing. So that, I've done every one of them. So after a while, you kind of get inured to it, or, or a little jaded about it. But,
Right.
After missing a year, after missing this year, I realized that, it was an opportunity to see just about every friend I have in the world over the course of that one weekend.
Yeah.
And the time of year it's the first big festival of the season. So you probably, you might not have seen those friends through the winter months, because typically, for me anyway, everything slows down tremendously in the wintertime.
Right.
And so, it's like a big homecoming, it's like a family reunion.
Sure.
And so I kind of missed that part of it this year.
Now you and Sam and Jerry and Peter Rowland and somebody else, I think there's about 5 or 6 of you played there.
Yeah, Joe Smothers would be the other one.
Okay.
Yeah, we're the only 5 that have played every single MerleFest.
Wow.
And Coleman, is first runner-up. I think he missed the first one, but he's been there every year since. So
Successful, man. It's been
and yeah, and that's been a fun set to do. It's always really loose. We kind of figure it out as we go along, and we've known each other. We've all known each other for, most of us for 40 years or better.
Yeah.
So it's always fun. And I was really happy, Steve Johnston, the old artist director there, who left a couple years ago, asked me to put together, he was great. He called me and said, look, I'll give you this time spot to do whatever you want, do something that's cool, that you think is cool. And, and then I ran into somebody else who, in the administration up there, who mentioned to me that there were only 5 of us that had played all of the MerleFests. I thought, oh, there it is.
There you go.
That's my set. That's my set, and it became pretty popular. We've done it every year since, and yeah, it's terrific fun.
I enjoy watching it every year that we get to be there. And I know Billy G enjoyed getting to play with y'all the one year. T. Michael was double booked or something, and y'all got Billy G on that set.
Oh, that was great. Yeah. When I found out Coleman couldn't do it, G was my first choice. And I mean, I think he may have had to juggle a couple of things around to be able to do it, but he really wanted to do it, and I really wanted him to do it. And so yeah, he did a great job, and that was one of the best vet sets we've ever done.
Right. Good time. Well, tell us, we got a little bit more time here about Green Acres. That's when me and you first probably met, when I was up there with Acoustic Syndicate. And I know you spent a lot of time up there playing and just hanging out. And man, that was a great music scene too, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. I started going up there. I never really played up there a lot except sitting in with bands. I started going up there when the Newgrass guys were there,
Right.
because it's close to home, and it was a chance for me to visit with them. And so I started going up there then, and I met, Steve Metcalf again. We got reacquainted because years ago, back in the mid '70s, I was in that band Buddy Row, and there was another band doing the same tour circuit called Plum Hollow, the Plum Hollow Band. And Steve Metcalf had worked with Plum Hollow kind of as a roadie and as manager, I think. So I met Steve back in those days, and then we kind of lost touch with each other. And I realized he was running the Green Acres show when I went up to see Sam and the guys. And so, I ended up going up there a lot more often after that. Steve and I became friendly, and, and my parents would go up there on occasion to see Eddie and Martha Adcock. And they were big fans of them. And so, I remember going, in fact, I just found a picture of Norman Blake and Big Daddy and me
Steve over looking at Norman. I've seen that picture.
Yeah. So I just found it just a couple of weeks ago. I'd forgotten about it, so it's upstairs in my office.
How about that? Yeah, that's about the time I started picking and getting out. I was probably 17 years old. Met you up there. I was playing with the Syndicate, and Steve told me, he said, "Man, Jack Lawrence is going to get up and play with us here tonight." And I was just tickled to death, Of course, we became friends and done a lot of things over the years. And I know I had a workshop here a few years back, and you've been doing a lot of those over the last couple decades and teaching folks your style. And You've been doing a lot of different workshops, haven't you?
Yeah, not so many the last year or so. Of course, nothing this year. But I did Steve Kaufman's camp several times. I did the Swananoa Gathering.
Mm-hmm.
I did the up in Michigan. There was actually a banjo camp that put on by Elderly Instruments. But I went up there and did guitar and and played around with Bill Keith and a couple other hot banjo players.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was another one. I did another one in Texas. Yeah, I have a hard time with private lessons and seeing the same people. Or I just private lessons don't work well for me. But because I don't teach well. For one thing, it's all me. It's not the students. It's all me. The workshop thing, which I've done for years, at festivals and that sort of thing, is a little easier for me because most of the time those people have questions they can, and also there was a little bit more of a performance thing happening with those things. I taught it.
What's a cool thing about workshops, and I know you've done a bunch, I've seen you do them at MerleFest and other places, and of course we've done a few of them together, is it's not really the teaching one-on-one, but it's picking out knowledge that you have. And you have knowledge on the guitar, man, and about music, period. And I think that's one thing that stands out about Jack Lawrence to me.
Well, thank you. Like I said, I enjoy doing them. One of my favorites was one a few years ago. I don't know, it may have been 5 or 6 years ago now at MerleFest with Brian Sutton. We've done several over the years, and I always learn something when I'm I'm doing a workshop with Brian. And then just about every workshop, I learn something from one of the people I'm doing it with, or even people attending the workshop. I learned something from. And the same was true. I did a thing. One of my favorites was a thing I did in England called Sore Fingers Week, and that was big fun. Teaching the English and Irish folks that attended this festival. I did one in Slovenia a few years back with Bepi Gambetta. That was a lot of fun because I saw people from all over Europe at that one, and they were all familiar with me and what I do, and so that made it easier to communicate.
Right. So what you've been doing, the last couple of years, and we'd talk kind of off camera, but I know you've been sitting in doing a lot of stuff with Peter Rowan and David Greer, you'd mentioned.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, I've known Peter for years, and we played together at MerleFest and other places. But Peter had a record called Carter Stanley's Eyes. It came out a couple of years ago now, I guess. And so he called me to come in and play guitar on that record. So it came out in April, I guess of 2018. I think that's right. And immediately started doing shows to promote that record. And he called me, and so I ended up the last 2018, 2019. I spent the summers doing festivals with him, and that was great. That was great fun. There was probably going to be some stuff this year. Of course, this year nobody's doing anything.
Yeah.
But it was great. I rekindled my friendship with Blaine Sprouse, great fiddle player. Blaine was playing with Peter. And I made a new friend in Patrick Sauber, who was a terrific banjo player. He's also a terrific guitar player and mandolin player and singer.
Great.
You know, so I made a new friend there, and Chris Henry. You know, I knew Chris's parents almost 50 years ago.
Chris has moved to Charlotte, hasn't he?
He has. I've not seen him since the pandemic, but he and I would occasionally get together and play a tune or two.
Yeah.
And so and I was out with David Greer and Robbie Folks. Robbie used to play with years ago. Played with Special Consensus. Play guitar with them, but he's a singer-songwriter guy, and he's just really terrifically funny. He's a good guitar player. He writes both funny and serious songs, and it's just a hoot to be around. And so is David Greer.
Oh yeah.
And so, you know, and I had sat in with Robbie a couple of times when he was around town, and you know, we had a mutual friend in Shad Cobb, because Shad was doing some fiddle work with Robbie. And so I kind of met Robbie because I went to see Shad.
Yeah.
And so, you know, Robbie and I started playing some together, and then we did a little trip to the Midwest. He and I and David Greer, and that was a lot of fun. And we wanted to do another tour this year, and actually had most of it booked. And of course, they're gone.
Everybody's home.
Everybody's you know, sitting on their couch now.
Talk on Zoom.
Right.
About the good news.
And so we're you know, we still have some of those dates have rolled over to 2021. So, you know, if I don't get so old I can't do it anymore before we get back on the, you know, on the path here, you know, I'll be doing some stuff with them.
Right. Well, I hope it all comes back for us all next year. If it's, you know, we'll take it, but we all need to be out picking. Well, about one more
That's a fact.
here, Jack. On Carolina style, I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier in the conversation, but that's kind of what we call this season is the Carolina Sessions. And man, you've been a big part of that on guitar playing throughout the Carolinas for years. But give us just again your thoughts on the Carolina style of bluegrass and acoustic music.
Well, you know, even going back to when I was a kid, you know, there were all these bands at fiddlers conventions from the area, and from, you know, actually from Virginia too. You know, I'd see Larry Richardson, these things. You know, L.W. Lambert always had a great band, and there was a pulse that you know, like I said, a strong rhythm section and a drive that I think is inherent to the Piedmont of North Carolina. A.L. Wood had it,
Right.
in his banjo playing. You know, Tommy Edwards had it in his guitar playing. You know, and of course, you know, all the kids, you know, Jimmy Arnold and Lewis Pirtle, Lou Reed. I still have a hard time calling him Lou Reed. And Jimmy Haley, and you know, gosh, there was Larry Campbell, always had a band with his son Danny playing bass, and Dennis Siebert and his father, and all of them, all the ones that I mentioned had this drive that you don't want to mistake with speed. I mean, it's a rhythmic thing, playing right on top of the beat or slightly ahead. So it's never behind. It's always either on top or right on it.
Right.
And so there's a certain pulse that in the rhythm that you know, I don't know that I heard. Of course, you know, I grew up in North Carolina, so it's all I know. But to me, you know, if you go back, you know, Doyle Lawson's first band had it, and all the subsequent bands have had it. But, you know, that first Quicksilver with the three guys from North Carolina completely changed, you know. Out of that band came the Lonesome River Band, you know, and all these other younger bands trying to emulate that sound.
That's right.
And that has not gone away. You know, most younger bands now have that, you know, are trying to achieve that kind of rhythmic sound. And it all came to me, to my way of thinking anyway, and for what I've seen, you know, came out of Piedmont, North Carolina.
That's a great answer, man. Nobody's put it any better than that right there. Well, folks, we've enjoyed it. Y'all check out Jack Lawrence's music. Check out the recordings he's done over the years, and just his guitar playing. He's a great rhythm player and a great lead player. You'll know it's Jack Lawrence. If you study guitar playing, he stands out among everybody else, and that's a hard thing to do in guitar playing, isn't it, Jack?
It was a hard thing to do with anything.
That's correct.
You know, I mean, you know, my dad told me a long time ago, you know, I'd go and I'd have this Doc Watson piece worked out note for note, and he says, well, that's pretty good of your Doc, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, you need to put some of yourself into that. And you know, I kind of took that to heart. I mean, for years I stopped listening to guitar players just because of that.
Yeah.
You know, I'd pick up licks from, you know, I'd listen to Sonny Osborne play banjo, or Kenny Baker. I'd try to play Kenny's licks on guitar, and that's where I really got started, because I really got into Kenny Baker for a while. Yeah. Even though I don't play fiddle, but you know, just his phrasing and choice of notes, you know, and I was learning that stuff. So, you know, that's how you achieve your style. You know, your style is really based on your limitations.
Sure.
You know, I mean, it really is. There's a lot of stuff I'd like to be able to do, but can't. And there's a lot of stuff I'd like to be able to do and then never do it. You know, yeah, you know, you need to listen to a whole lot of different genres, and any lick from any instrument that strikes you, you know, try to apply that to your instrument. And after a while, you know, your own style comes about through that.
Right.
Yep.
Great thing. What music is, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
Well, until next time, everybody, thank you for joining us.
Yes.
All right. Thanks.
Yes. Bye-bye.